The security guard's grip was firm, but not cruel, as he escorted me through the sliding glass doors of St. Mary's Medical Center. Behind us, I could hear Dr. Henderson's voice echoing through the lobby, "And don't let him back in. That man is a menace to patient safety. Third hospital in 6 months. Third time being marched out like a common criminal." But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that in exactly 17 minutes, everything would change. A girl would flatline, doctors would panic, and the very skills they called dangerous would be the only thing standing between a father and the loss of everything he held dear. The concrete steps of St. Mary's were cold beneath me as I sat there, clutching my worn medical bag between my knees. October in Chicago had a bite to it, the kind of wind that cut through your jacket and reminded you that winter was coming whether you were ready or not. I wasn't ready for much of anything these days. My phone buzzed against my leg, another rejection email. No doubt. I'd stopped counting them after the 15th. The subject lines all blurred together. Application status update. Ray, medical license reinstatement. Thank you for your interest. However, Dr. Miguel Ramirez, that used to mean something. 20 years in emergency medicine. To tours in Afghanistan where I'd sewn soldiers back together in makeshift field hospitals. While mortars exploded overhead, a Bronze Star gathering dust in a storage unit because I couldn't afford rent on a real apartment anymore. Now I was just another washed-up doc who couldn't play by the rules. Your little parlor tricks might fool desperate families, but they don't fool real doctors. Henderson's words from 10 minutes ago still burned in my chest. Parlor tricks. That's what they called it when you trusted your hands more than a machine. When you looked at the patient instead of just the chart. I pulled out my phone, already knowing what I'd find. The email was from the State Medical Board, stamped with today's date, * Dr. Ramirez. After careful review of your case, we must uphold the suspension of your license pending further investigation into unconventional treatment methods. The board has concerns about your documented deviations from established protocols in the following cases. * I didn't need to read the rest. I knew the cases by heart. Tommy Martinez, age 12, appendicitis. The ultrasound said his appendix was fine, but my hands told me different when I examined his abdomen. I operated anyway, saved his life. Margaret Chen, 73, stroke. The window for clot-busting medication has supposedly closed, but I could see in her eyes that she was still fighting. I gave her the drugs anyway. She walked out of that hospital 2 weeks later. Jessica Williams, 19, overdose. The textbook said to use one antidote, but I had seen this particular combination of drugs in Afghanistan, soldiers experimenting with local substances. I used a different approach, one I learned from a medic who'd saved 3 lives with the same technique. All 3 patients lived. All 3 would have died if I'd followed the rules, but rules were rules, and I was the doctor who couldn't seem to follow them. A siren wailed in the distance. Growing closer, probably headed to St. Mary's, they handled most of the emergency trauma for this part of the city. I used to be part of that team. Used to be the guy they called when things got complicated, when the textbook answers weren't enough. Now, I was the guy sitting on the steps outside, wondering if I'd ever practice medicine again. The siren was loud now, right at the hospital entrance. I watched the ambulance pull up, saw the paramedics jump out with practiced efficiency. A young woman on the stretcher, unconscious, neck brace indicating trauma. Car accident, probably. The kind of case where seconds mattered and experience counted for everything. I stood up instinctively, then caught myself. Not my case, not my hospital, not my problem. The automatic door swallowed the medical team, and I was alone again with the October wind and my failures. That's when I heard it. "Please, someone help her. She's dying." The voice came from inside the hospital, raw with terror and desperation. It was the sound every emergency doctor knew and dreaded, a family member watching their loved one slip away.
But there was something else in that voice, something that made me look up from my phone, made my 20 years of training kick into high gear. This wasn't just fear. This was a parent's worst nightmare coming true. Please, she's all I have. Every instinct I'd developed over the decades told me to move, to help, to do what I'd sworn to do when I first put on scrubs and walked into an emergency room. But I was banned from this hospital. Security would arrest me if I set foot inside. Another voice, calmer but urgent. Code blue, room for 112. Code blue, room for 112, 4th floor. Cardiac arrest. Someone's heart had stopped, and from the sound of that first voice, someone's world was ending. I was already moving before I consciously decided to. My legs carried me toward those glass doors that had just spit me out like something distasteful. The security guard who'd escorted me was nowhere to be seen, probably dealing with the ambulance arrival. The lobby was chaos. Nurses running toward the elevators, residents looking confused and scared. That voice still echoing from somewhere above. Please don't let her die, please. I knew I shouldn't be here. Knew I was risking arrest, risking what little remained of my reputation. But 20 years of emergency medicine doesn't just switch off because some bureaucrats take away your license. When someone's dying, you help, period. The elevators were packed with medical staff responding to the code. I found the stairwell and started climbing, taking the steps two at a time. My legs burned. Too many months of cheap meals and sleeping in my car had taken their toll, but I pushed through it. Fourth floor. The door opened onto controlled chaos. Doctors and nurses clustered around room for 112. Voices raised over the sound of medical equipment. The heart monitor's alarm was screaming that flat, continuous tone that meant only one thing: no heartbeat. Time, someone called out. 22 minutes down came the reply at 20-2 minutes. In most cases, that was too long. Brain death started after 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. But I'd seen people come back from longer. In Afghanistan, when evacuation took hours and you had to keep fighting for every second, I'd learned that the human body could surprise you. I pushed closer to the doorway, close enough to see inside. A girl on the bed, maybe 16 or 17, pale as death. The crash team was working on her, chest compressions, medications, defibrillation. All by the book, all methodical and proper, all wrong. I could see it immediately, the way you see a mistake in a painting or hear a wrong note in a symphony. Her positioning wasn't right. The rise and fall of her chest during compressions looked off, and her color, standing against the far wall, held back by two nurses, was a man in an expensive suit. Even in his desperation, even with his face twisted by grief, I recognize him. Marcus Whitfield, tech billionaire. His face had been on the cover of Fortune magazine just last month. Right now, none of that mattered. Right now, he was just a father watching his daughter die. Please, he was saying, his voice breaking, please, just try something else, anything else. Dr. Henderson was leading the code team. His voice clinical and detached. We've tried everything, Mr. Whitfield. Sometimes, despite our best efforts. No, Whitfield broke free from the nurses restraining him, lunging toward the bed. She's 17 years old. She can't. Henderson caught him gently but firmly. I know this is difficult, but we've been working for over 20 minutes. At this point, even if we got her back, he didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew what 20+ minutes without oxygen meant. Even if they restarted her heart, the girl they brought back wouldn't be the same girl who'd been wheeled in. Time of death, 9:47 p.m. Henderson announced. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Someone turned off the heart monitor, ending its mechanical wail. The sudden silence was somehow worse than the noise. Marcus Whitfield made a sound I'd heard before, in field hospitals when we had to tell soldiers their buddy didn't make it. It was the sound of a human being breaking in real time. No, he whispered. Then louder, no. You can't stop. She's all I have left since her mother. Please, just try something else. Henderson's voice was kind but final. Mr. Whitfield, I'm truly sorry. We did everything we could. Sometimes you did everything wrong. The words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. Every head in the room turned toward me, and I saw Henderson's face flush red with recognition and anger. Security, he barked. Get this man out of here immediately. But Marcus Whitfield's eyes had locked onto mine, and I saw something there that made my chest tight. Not hope exactly. Hope was too fragile for what I saw. It was something fiercer. The refusal to accept defeat that I'd seen in soldiers who kept fighting, even when the situation was impossible. Wait, he said, his voice hoarse but commanding. You said we did everything wrong. What do you mean? Henderson stepped between us, his face flushed with anger. "Mr. Whitfield, this man is not a doctor. His medical license has been suspended. He's been banned from practicing medicine for I've been practicing medicine since before half these residents were born," I interrupted, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "And that girl isn't dead. Not yet." The room erupted in protests. Henderson's voice rose above the others. "This is completely inappropriate. Security." But Whitfield held up a hand that somehow commanded absolute silence. "When you're worth $12 billion, people listen when you speak. What do you see that they don't?" He asked me directly. I looked at his daughter, really looked. The way I'd been trained to look in places where missing a detail meant someone didn't come home. Her lips had a faint blue tinge, but it wasn't the deep blue of cardiac arrest. Her neck showed subtle swelling on the left side that the team had missed, and her chest. During compressions, it wasn't moving the way it should. Tension pneumothorax. I said, the diagnosis clear in my mind. Her lung collapsed, probably from whatever trauma brought her in. The pressure built up in her chest cavity, and it's compressing her heart, preventing it from beating effectively. Henderson scoffed. "That's impossible. We already checked for pneumothorax. The chest x-rays were completely clear." "X-rays don't always show it in the early stages," I replied, stepping closer despite the security guards moving toward me. "And you've been doing chest compressions for 22 minutes. Any small pneumothorax would be massive by now." I could see it in my mind, the air trapped in her chest cavity, building pressure with every compression, squeezing her heart until it couldn't beat. It was a diagnosis that required more than machines and protocols. It required hands-on examination, the kind of physical assessment that modern medicine was moving away from. "She needs immediate needle decompression," I continued. "Right now. Every second we waste talking, that pressure is building. This is insane," Henderson muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. "Mr. Whitfield, even if this charlatan were correct, which he's not, your daughter has been down for over 20 minutes. The likelihood of meaningful recovery is better than zero," I finished, "which is what she has if you do nothing." The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of medical equipment and Marcus W. Whitfield's ragged breathing. I could see him, weighing his options. Trust the medical establishment that had just pronounced his daughter dead, or trust the disgraced doctor who claimed they'd missed something. "Do it," he said simply. "Sir, I cannot allow an unlicensed individual to," Henderson began. "You just pronounced my daughter dead," Whitfield's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Your protocols, your by-the-book approach, it failed. She's dead according to you. So what's the harm in trying something different?" I was already moving, muscle memory taking over. My medical bag, the same one I'd carried through to war zones, was still slung over my shoulder. From it, I pulled out a large bore needle, the kind used for emergency procedures when every second counted. "I need a 14 gauge for catheter," I called out. To my surprise, one of the younger residents moved to comply, either caught up in the moment or remembering that sometimes desperate times called for desperate measures. Henderson grabbed the resident's arm. "Don't you dare. This man is not authorized to." "Dr. Henderson." Whitfield's voice was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. "Step back." The billionaire's eyes never left mine as I approached his daughter's bedside. "If you're wrong about this, then she's still dead, and you're no worse off than you are now," I said, positioning the needle at the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line on her left side. "But if I'm right," I didn't finish the sentence. Instead, I focused on the anatomy, feeling for the landmarks I'd located by touch in field hospitals, where proper lighting was a luxury. The room held its collective breath as I inserted the needle, angling it correctly, searching for that telltale release of pressure. For a moment, nothing. Then I felt it. The needle suddenly moved freely, and there was a soft hiss of escaping air. The trapped pressure that had been crushing her heart was finally releasing. The change was immediate and unmistakable. Her chest rose slightly as her lung began to re-expand. The deathly pallor started to fade from her lips, and then, on the heart monitor that someone had turned back on, a blip appeared. Then another. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. The blips became a rhythm, weak and irregular, but unmistakably a heartbeat. Her body was responding, fighting back now that the pressure on her heart had been relieved. "Resume compressions," I ordered, stepping back. Gently, her heart's trying to beat on its own now. "We just need to support it." The crash team sprang back into action, but the energy in the room had completely changed. Before, they'd been going through the motions of a futile resuscitation. Now they were supporting a heart that wanted to live. Within minutes, her vital signs began to stabilize. Her heart rate strengthened. Her blood pressure came up. The blue tinge disappeared from her lips entirely, replaced by healthy pink. And then her eyes fluttered open. She was confused, disoriented, normal after what she'd been through. She tried to speak, but couldn't with the breathing tube. Her eyes darted around frantically until they found her father's face, Sophie, Marcus. Whitfield was at her bedside, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Sophie, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can hear me." She squeezed. The room erupted in controlled chaos, adjusting medications, running new tests, preparing to transfer her to the ICU for monitoring. But through it all, I could see the transformation in everyone's faces. 20 minutes ago, they'd been preparing to call the morgue. Now they were planning for recovery. I stood against the wall, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the procedure was wearing off, leaving behind the familiar weight of 20 years of high-stakes medicine. My hands weren't shaking. They never shook anymore, not after everything I'd seen. But I could feel the emotional toll of bringing someone back from the edge. Dr. Henderson appeared beside me, his face unreadable. For a moment, we stood in silence, watching the team work to stabilize Sophie Whitfield. "How did you know?" he asked quietly. "Experience," I said, "and the willingness to look beyond what the machines tell you." He nodded slowly. That was impressive work. The kind of clinical judgment they don't teach in medical school. Coming from Henderson, those words meant more than any medal or commendation. He was old school, trained when doctors still relied on their hands and eyes as much as their equipment. He understood what I'd done in a way that some of the younger doctors couldn't. But I also knew this wasn't over. I'd just performed a medical procedure in a hospital where I was banned, on a patient who'd been officially pronounced dead. There would be paperwork, investigations, probably criminal charges. Marcus Whitfield seemed to read my thoughts. He appeared at my elbow, his eyes still red from crying but fierce with something I recognized, the determination of someone who'd just been given back everything they thought they'd lost. "We need to talk," he said quietly, "all of us." But first, he turned to his daughter, who was now more alert, her eyes tracking movement around the room. "Sophie, there's someone I want you to meet," he said, his voice gentle. "This is Dr. Ramirez. He's the one who brought you back to me." She couldn't speak with the breathing tube, but her eyes found mine and held them in those eyes. I saw something I hadn't seen in months of rejection letters and closed doors, gratitude. Not just from her, but from her father, who was looking at me like I just handed him the most precious gift in the world, which I suppose I had. A nurse approached with a clipboard full of forms. "Dr. Henderson, we need to discuss the irregularities in this case. The fact that Mr. Ramirez isn't licensed to can handle that later." Henderson cut her off. "Right now, our priority is patient care. Sophie needs to get to the ICU for monitoring." As they prepared to move her, Sophie's hand found her father's and squeezed again. This time, though, she managed to mouth a single word. "Thank you." I nodded, not trusting my voice. In that moment, all the rejection letters and closed doors didn't matter. All the bureaucrats who'd called my methods unconventional, all the administrators who'd branded me a liability, none of it mattered. Because Sophie Whitfield was alive, because her father wasn't planning a funeral, because sometimes, just sometimes, being willing to break the rules meant everything. But as they wheeled her toward the ICU, I knew the hard part was just beginning. I'd saved a life tonight, but I'd also created a problem that wouldn't be solved with a needle and clinical judgment. Marcus Whitfield caught my arm as the medical team disappeared down the hallway. "Like I said, we need to talk. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., conference room B on the second floor." His grip was firm, his eyes intense. Don't worry about security or administration or any of that. Just be here. Mr. Whitfield, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but you saved my daughter's life. He said simply, when everyone else had given up, when the experts said it was hopeless. You saw what they missed. Sophie is alive because you were willing to take a risk. He paused, looking back toward where they'd taken his daughter. She's all I have left, Dr. Ramirez. Her mother died 3 years ago, cancer. Sophie was in that car accident tonight because she was racing home from grief counseling, still struggling with losing her mom. His voice broke slightly. When they said she was gone, when they turned off that monitor, I thought I was going to lose the only good thing left in my life. You gave her back to me. You gave me back my reason for living. I stared at him, understanding dawning. This wasn't just about gratitude. This was about a father who'd almost lost everything and was determined to make sure the man who saved his daughter didn't disappear into the system that had already rejected him. 9 a.m. He repeated, "We're going to fix this, all of it." As he walked away to follow his daughter to the ICU, I stood alone in the now quiet hallway. The chaos was over, the crisis resolved, but I could feel the weight of what came next settling on my shoulders. I'd broken more rules tonight than in any single incident that had led to my suspension. I'd practiced medicine without a license, performed an invasive procedure without proper authorization, and interfered with an official hospital code response. But Sophie Whitfield was breathing. Her heart was beating. She would wake up tomorrow and see her father's face, would go home and live whatever life lay ahead of her. Sometimes that had to be enough. What happens when a disgraced doctor's unorthodox methods clash with hospital politics and billion-dollar influence? Will Dr. Ramirez get his redemption? Or will saving Sophie's life cost him everything he has left? Chapter 2 reveals the shocking confrontation that changes everything. If this story grabbed you by the throat and wouldn't let go, smash that like button and subscribe for Chapter 2. Share this with someone who believes that sometimes the best medicine can't be found in any textbook. Your support keeps these incredible stories coming. Comment below. Have you ever had to break the rules to do what was right? What would you have done in Dr. Ramirez's position? The conference room at St. Mary's Medical Center felt like an interrogation chamber. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the polished table where my fate would be decided. I'd been in plenty of difficult situations: Taliban mortar attacks, surgery with no anesthesia, telling families their loved ones didn't make it. But somehow this felt worse. Maybe because this time I had something to lose again. Marcus Whitfield sat across from me, looking every inch the billionaire CEO in his tailored suit. But his eyes were those of a father who'd almost lost his daughter 12 hours ago. Beside him sat his lawyer, some high-powered attorney whose hourly rate probably exceeded my monthly income back when I had an income. On the other side of the table, Dr. Henderson, the hospital's chief administrator, Jana Walsh, their legal counsel, and a woman I didn't recognize, but whose expensive clothes and briefcase suggested she wasn't here to offer me a job. "Let's begin," Administrator Walsh said, opening a thick file. "Mr. Ramirez, what occurred last night was highly irregular. You're not licensed to practice medicine in this state. You're not credentialed at this hospital, and you performed an invasive medical procedure on a patient who had been officially pronounced deceased. Sophie Whitfield was never deceased," I said quietly. "She was misdiagnosed." The unknown woman leaned forward. "Dr. Patricia Vance, State Medical Board. Mr. Ramirez, your medical license was suspended for a reason. 3 separate incidents where you deviated from established protocols, endangering patient safety. I saved 3 lives," I replied. "Tommy Martinez would have died from a ruptured appendix if I'd waited for more tests. Margaret Chen would have suffered permanent brain damage if I hadn't administered medication outside the approved window. Jessica Williams would have died from that overdose if I'd followed the textbook approach." "You got lucky," Dr. Vance said dismissively. "Medicine isn't about hunches and gut feelings. It's about evidence-based protocols designed to ensure patient safety." Marcus Whitfield had been silent until now, but something in his expression shifted. "Dr. Vance, with all due respect, your evidence-based protocols killed my daughter last night. Mr. Whitfield, I understand you're grateful, but no, you don't understand. His voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being heard. Your protocols pronounced Sophie dead after 22 minutes. Your evidence-based medicine gave up on a 17-year-old girl. Dr. Ramirez saw what your entire medical team missed. Dr. Henderson shifted uncomfortably. Marcus, we followed standard resuscitation protocols. After 20 minutes without response, you followed a checklist. Whitfield interrupted. Dr. Ramirez looked at my daughter. I watched the interplay, realizing this was about more than just my medical future. This was about fundamental approaches to medicine. The human element versus the institutional machinery. Administrator Walsh consulted her notes. Mr. Ramirez, your actions last night, while successful, were completely unauthorized. You could face criminal charges for practicing medicine without a license. Are you planning to press charges? Whitfield asked, his tone dangerously quiet. Walsh and the legal counsel exchanged glances. That depends on several factors. The hospital's liability, the board's investigation. Let me make something clear, Whitfield said, leaning back in his chair. Sophie is alive because Dr. Ramirez was willing to break your rules. If you want to punish him for saving my daughter's life, that's your choice. But it will be a very expensive choice. The lawyer beside him opened a briefcase and withdrew a document. We've prepared a preliminary lawsuit against St. Mary's Medical Center for medical malpractice, resulting in wrongful death. But Sophie didn't die, Dr. Vance protested, because Dr. Ramirez intervened. The lawyer replied smoothly. The hospital's medical team failed to diagnose a treatable condition and pronounce a living patient deceased. Only the intervention of an outside physician prevented actual death. We're seeking damages for emotional distress, pain and suffering, and medical malpractice. Walsh's face went white. Mr. Whitfield, surely we can discuss this reasonably. We are discussing it reasonably, he replied. I'm offering you a choice. You can pursue charges against the man who saved my daughter, and we'll see you in court. Or you can recognize that sometimes innovation and experience matter more than following procedures. I stared at him. Mr. Whitfield, you don't need to. Yes, I do. He turned to me, his expression intense. Dr. Ramirez, tell them about Afghanistan. The room fell silent. I hadn't expected this. Hadn't wanted my military service dragged into a hospital conference room. That's not relevant to Dr. Vance began. It's completely relevant, Whitfield said firmly. Dr. Miguel Ramirez, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. Bronze Star for saving 17 soldiers when their convoy was hit by an IED. Field surgeon who developed trauma techniques that are now standard practice in military medicine. He leaned forward, his voice gaining intensity. Before his suspension, he had one of the highest success rates for complex emergency cases on the West Coast. Tell me, Dr. Vance, how many lives have you saved in the field with improvised equipment and no backup? Dr. Vance's lips tightened. Military medicine operates under different circumstances, life and death circumstances, I said quietly. Where following protocols can get people killed. The room was quiet now. All attention focused on me. I hadn't talked about Afghanistan in years. Hadn't wanted to relive those memories. But maybe it was time. Forward Operating Base Chapman. 2019. I began. Convoy hit by an IED. 17 casualties. The protocols said to stabilize and evacuate. But the helicopter couldn't land because of enemy fire. I had 17 soldiers bleeding out, and the nearest surgical facility was 4 hours away. I looked around the table, seeing their faces change as they began to understand. The protocols said to follow the ABCs: airway, breathing, circulation, systematic approach, 1 patient at a time. But I could see that 3 of those soldiers would die if I followed that approach. So I broke the rules. What did you do? Henderson asked quietly. I triaged by gut instinct instead of severity scores. I used non-standard drug combinations to keep people conscious, so they could help with their own treatment. I performed surgery with equipment that wasn't designed for it. I paused, remembering. I broke every protocol in the book, and all 17 soldiers lived. Dr. Vance frowned. That's anecdotal evidence. One case doesn't justify it. It wasn't one case, I said. It was hundreds, every deployment, every emergency. I had to choose between following protocols and saving lives, and every time, I chose to save lives. Which brings us to why you were suspended, she replied coldly. 3 cases where you ignored established medical guidelines. 3 cases where I trusted my experience over a computer algorithm. I corrected. Tommy Martinez's ultrasound was normal, but when I examined him, I could feel the inflammation in his abdomen. The machine said he was fine. My hand said he was dying. I stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked the hospital parking lot. Margaret Chen came in 90 minutes after her stroke symptoms started. The protocol said the window for medication had closed, but when I looked in her eyes, I could see she was still fighting, still trying to communicate. I gave her the drugs anyway. And Jessica Williams, Dr. Vance asked, 19 years old, overdose on a combination of substances her friends couldn't identify. The toxicology screen would take hours. The standard antidotes weren't working. But I'd seen this exact combination in Afghanistan, soldiers experimenting with local substances. I knew what would work. I turned back to face the room. In all 3 cases, following protocols would have meant death. Breaking them meant life. It's that simple. Administrator Walsh cleared her throat. Mr. Ramirez, I understand your reasoning, but medicine has moved beyond individual judgment calls. We have protocols for a reason. Your protocols killed my daughter, Marcus Whitfield said again, his voice cutting through her words. 22 minutes of textbook resuscitation while the real problem compressed her heart until it couldn't beat. He stood up, moving to the window beside me. Do you know what Sophie said when she woke up this morning? I shook my head. She asked about the doctor who saved her. When I told her what happened, she said, Dad, maybe some rules are meant to be broken when lives are on the line. He smiled sadly. Smart kid. Gets that from her mother. The mention of his wife, Sophie's mother, brought a different energy to the room. This wasn't just about medical protocols or hospital policies. This was about a family that had already lost too much. Dr. Ramirez, he continued, Sophie wants to meet you properly when she's feeling better. She wants to thank the doctor who gave her father a reason to keep going. Dr. Vance shuffled her papers. This is all very touching, but it doesn't change the facts. Mr. Ramirez practiced medicine without a license. He performed an unauthorized procedure. He interfered with an official hospital response and saved a life, Henderson said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He'd been mostly silent through the meeting, but now he was studying me with a different expression. I've been practicing emergency medicine for 30 years, he said slowly. I've seen doctors who could recite every protocol but couldn't think on their feet. I've seen others who could diagnose complex conditions with nothing but their hands and experience. He paused, choosing his words carefully. What Dr. Ramirez did last night, that was medicine at its best, old-school clinical judgment combined with modern knowledge. Dr. Henderson, Administrator Walsh said warningly, No, Jana, let me finish. He looked directly at me. I was wrong to have you escorted out. I was wrong to dismiss your concerns about other cases. And I was wrong last night when I pronounced Sophie Whitfield dead. The admission hung in the air like a challenge. Here was the chief of emergency medicine admitting error in front of hospital administration. And the state medical board. Marcus Whitfield seized the moment. Dr. Henderson, would you support Dr. Ramirez's license reinstatement? I would, Henderson said without hesitation, based on what I witnessed last night. He's exactly the kind of doctor we need in emergency medicine. Dr. Vance looked frustrated. One successful case doesn't erase 3 documented protocol violations. What if it wasn't just one case? Whitfield interrupted. He nodded to his lawyer, who produced another document from the briefcase. We've done some research on Dr. Ramirez's career, the lawyer said. His success rates, patient outcomes, peer reviews before the suspension. The data is quite compelling. He slid the document across the table. 97% success rate on complex emergency cases. Patient satisfaction. Scores in the 99th percentile. Peer nominations for Physician of the Year 3 times. Until the protocol violations, Dr. Vance pointed out. 3 cases out of thousands, I said. 3 times where I chose to save a life instead of following a rule, and in all 3 cases, I was right. Administrator Walsh was reviewing the document, her expression changing as she read. These numbers are impressive. They're more than impressive, Whitfield said. They represent hundreds of families who got to keep their loved ones. Because Dr. Ramirez was willing to think beyond the textbook, he moved back to the table, his presence commanding attention. I want to make a proposal. Everyone leaned forward slightly. When a billionaire says he wants to make a proposal, people listen. St. Mary's establishes a new emergency medicine research program, he said, focused on studying unconventional but effective treatment methods. Dr. Ramirez heads the program. With full medical privileges restored, the silence that followed was deafening. Administrator Walsh and the legal counsel exchanged rapid glances, probably calculating dollar signs. Mr. Whitfield, Dr. Vance said carefully, medical licensing doesn't work that way. We can't simply, you can recommend license reinstatement based on new evidence and changed circumstances, his lawyer interjected smoothly, especially when combined with appropriate oversight and continuing education requirements. Whitfield smiled, but it was the kind of smile that suggested he'd already thought several moves ahead. The program would be funded by a substantial donation to the hospital. Let's call it 8 figures. The number hit the room like a physical force. 8 figures. Somewhere between $10 and $99 million. Administrator Walsh's voice was carefully controlled. Mr. Whitfield, that's very generous. But we'd need to discuss this with the board of directors, of course. But I should mention that several other hospitals have expressed interest in such a program. Mass General, Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic. His smile widened. Amazing how quickly word spreads in the medical community. The threat was subtle but clear. Take the deal or watch the money and prestige go elsewhere. Dr. Vance was flipping through documents, clearly trying to find legal objections. There are still regulatory issues, oversight requirements, all of which can be addressed. Whitfield said smoothly, I happen to know several members of the state medical board quite well. Generous donors to various charitable causes, you understand. I stared at him, beginning to understand the full scope of what he was proposing. This wasn't just about getting my license back. This was about changing how emergency medicine was taught and practiced. Why? I asked. Why go to this trouble? His expression softened, and for a moment, the billionaire facade dropped away. Because last night, when everyone else had given up, you saw my daughter, really saw her. Not just a case or a protocol failure, but a person who deserved every chance to live. His voice caught slightly. Sophie is everything to me, Dr. Ramirez. When her mother died, I thought I might not survive the grief. Sophie kept me going, gave me a reason to get up every morning. Last night, I almost lost that reason. He stood up, straightening his jacket. You gave me back my daughter. Now I want to make sure other parents don't have to go through what I went through. I want doctors who think like you do, who see patients as people instead of problems to be solved with checklists. Administrator Walsh was furiously calculating, probably trying to figure out how to make this work, without admitting the hospital had made mistakes. We'd need to structure this very carefully. Oversight protocols, review committees, whatever you need, Whitfield said. But Dr. Ramirez gets his license back, and he gets the resources to train other doctors in these techniques. Dr. Henderson leaned forward. Miguel, what do you think? Are you interested in heading up something like this? The question caught me off guard. 6 months ago, I'd been a pariah, kicked out of hospitals and rejected by the medical establishment. Now I was being offered a chance to not just practice medicine again, but to teach it. I'd want to focus on diagnostic skills, I said slowly. Physical examination techniques that are being lost as we rely more on technology. How to see patterns that machines miss. How to trust clinical judgment when the algorithms fail. Exactly, Whitfield said. The human element in medicine. Dr. Vance was still looking through regulations, but her resistance was weakening. There would have to be strict oversight, regular reviews, Any deviation from approved protocols would need to be documented and justified. Agreed, I said. But the protocols would need to be flexible enough to allow for clinical judgment in unusual cases. And the program would need to demonstrate measurable outcomes. She continued. Improved patient results, reduced mortality rates. Done, Whitfield said. We'll track everything. Publish the results. Share the knowledge with the entire medical community. The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed the implications. This wasn't just about my career anymore. This was about potentially changing how emergency medicine was practiced across the country. Administrator Walsh broke the silence. We'd need to present this to the board of directors, get approval from the medical staff, work out the legal details. How long? Whitfield asked. 6 weeks, maybe 8, to get everything approved and in place. For weeks, he countered. Sophie starts physical therapy next week. I want Dr. Ramirez officially reinstated by the time she's back on her feet. Walsh looked at her legal counsel, who nodded slowly. We can make that work. Dr. Vance gathered her papers. I'll need to present this to the medical board, but given the circumstances and the proposed oversight, I think reinstatement is possible. As the meeting broke up, people filing out with handshakes and promises to call Marcus. Whitfield caught my arm. Walk with me, he said. We left the conference room and walked through the hospital corridors, past the room where Sophie had flatlined 18 hours earlier, past the nurse's station where I'd been escorted out in handcuffs more than once, past the emergency department where I'd once been part of the team. You didn't have to do this, I said as we waited for the elevator. Yes, I did. Sophie asked about you again this morning. Wanted to know if the doctor who saved her was okay, if he was getting in trouble for helping her. The elevator doors opened, revealing a young resident I recognized from the code response last night. He looked at me with a mixture of awe and confusion. Dr. Ramirez, I heard about what happened. That was incredible, what you did with the pneumothorax. We studied that case in medical school, but I'd never seen it in real life. I nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. Sometimes the textbook cases show up when you least expect them. Could you? Would you be willing to teach us some of those diagnostic techniques? The hands-on examination skills. Before I could answer, the elevator reached the 4th floor. As the doors opened, the resident looked back at me hopefully. We'll see, I said. Things might be changing around here. After he left, Whitfield and I continued to Sophie's room. She was awake, looking much better than she had 12 hours ago. The breathing tube was gone, replaced by a simple oxygen cannula. Her color was good, her eyes bright and alert. Dad, she said as we entered. Her voice was hoarse but strong. Is this him? Is this Dr. Ramirez? Sophie, meet Dr. Ramirez, Whitfield said, his voice warm with pride. The doctor who gave us both a second chance. She tried to sit up straighter, wincing slightly. Thank you, she said simply. Dad told me what happened, how everyone thought I was. And you didn't give up. Your heart never gave up, I said. It just needed a little help. She smiled, and I could see her mother in her features, something in the eyes that spoke of strength and determination. Dad says you might be starting a program here, teaching other doctors to think like you do. Maybe, I said. If everything works out, it will, she said with the confidence of youth. Dad always gets what he wants, and what we want is for other families to have doctors like you. As we prepared to leave, Sophie called out, Dr. Ramirez, will you come visit me again? I want to hear about Afghanistan, about how you learned to see things other people miss. I looked at Whitfield, who nodded encouragingly. I'd like that, Sophie. Walking back through the hospital, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, hope. Not just for my own career, but for the possibility of changing how medicine was practiced, of training doctors to trust their instincts as much as their instruments. There's one more thing, Whitfield said as we reached the lobby. The program, I want to name it after Sophie's mother, the Elizabeth Whitfield Center for Innovative Emergency Medicine. He pulled out his phone, showing me a photo of a woman with Sophie's eyes and smile. Elizabeth was a nurse before Sophie was born. She believed in the human touch in medicine, the importance of really seeing patients as people. She would have liked what you did last night, he continued. The willingness to break rules to save a life, to trust experience over protocol. I studied the photo, seeing the strength that had produced both Sophie and the man beside me. The Elizabeth Whitfield Center, I repeated. I like that, good. Because you're going to make it into something special. You're going to train doctors who think like you do, who see what others miss. As I walked out of St. Mary's Medical Center, not escorted by security this time, but as a future member of their medical staff, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The war zones, the suspensions, the months of rejection and doubt, all of it had led to last night, to seeing what others missed, to giving Sophie Whitfield a second chance at life and her father a reason to keep going. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dr. Ramirez, this is Sophie. Dad gave me your number. I can't wait to get better so we can talk more about medicine and helping people. Thank you for not giving up on me when everyone else did. P.S. Dad is already planning the new center. He's really excited about changing how doctors learn to see patients. Sophie, I smiled, pocketing the phone. 6 months ago, I'd been a doctor without the right to practice medicine. Today, I was still that same doctor, but now I had something I hadn't had in a long time. I had a future, a chance to teach others that sometimes the best medicine couldn't be found in any textbook. That seeing patients as people instead of problems was more than just good bedside manner. It was life-saving, and sometimes that made all the difference in the world. Dr. Ramirez got his redemption, but will the new center succeed in changing medicine forever? What challenges will he face training doctors to think beyond protocols? And how will Sophie's recovery impact everything they're trying to build? This incredible true-to-life story shows that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come from those willing to break the rules for the right reasons. If this story moved you, smash that like button and subscribe for more amazing stories of courage, redemption, and the power of human intuition. Share this with someone who's ever had to choose between following rules and doing what's right. Your engagement helps these powerful stories reach people who need to hear them. Comment below. What would you have done in Dr. Ramirez's position? Have you ever had to trust your instincts over what you were told to do? Let us know your thoughts. Hit that notification bell. More incredible stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things are coming your way.